I'm not sure how much of this is going to be too easy to see, so maybe afterwards, if you're interested in some of the things I have set up here, you can come up and look at it. What I want to talk about is just getting started in ham radio building. Now, I know a lot of you guys have already done a lot of building, and I have to confess that this is what it feels like sometimes when you're building. You can see these two fellows working. Actually, I was working on this talk. Jesse asked me last week if I'd give it, and yesterday, a Polish ham friend of mine, Jarosław Grabowski, posted this picture, and I thought it was really quite appropriate, because as I say, that is what it feels like. Jarosław is SQ3BKH. That's what it feels like sometimes when you're working on things. I hope that's not really plugged in, because there's going to have to be an X monkey there. But today I'm only going to talk about fairly simple kits and a little bit of home brewing. I'm not going to talk about some things that a lot of you, I'm sure, would build. Antennas. Antennas are a fertile place for building. Also power systems, battery systems, and solar panels and so forth. But that requires a level of expertise that I don't really have. And mostly what I'm going to talk about is just getting started with simple kit building. And so if you give me the next slide, and you probably don't need to see this, but you see there's a little FM radio, and I'm going to risk lifting it up. This is it, and it's basically a one-chip radio. If you see the front side there, and on the back side you see there's one interesting piece that you have to solder, and that's a little surface mount SO18 chip. That is interesting to solder that little guy on, but it works. And it's actually, these are junky little speakers, and it gives incredibly good sound. I was really amazed by this. The antenna is actually the cable to the speakers. They're designed for headphones, but I've got amplified speakers here to do that. So there's a little kit. You can get these like 2 for $10 or $6 or $8 a piece from Amazon, and Lord knows what you might be able to get them from China. They might pay you to take some of them. And it's an easy little build, although small.
How do you tune that?
Oh, can you see those little buttons? There's 2 sets of buttons there and 2 sets there. One is the volume up and down, and the other is channel up and down. It just seeks for the next channel. Interestingly enough, it doesn't go to the bottom of our FM band. So I just had GUC on there, which is 90.9. There's a couple stations that are like 88.3 that it doesn't get to. There's probably a way to modify it, but it's a fun little kit. You put it together in an afternoon, and it really works great. So I won't put the country stations on, but they're there too.
How sensitive is it?
Well, you're hearing it actually.
I mean, so far as the stations are not as powerful.
GUC is a real strong station. You'll hear all the local stations easily.
Complaining and grumbling, and toward a more positive.
So it's probably
spotlight on
the sensitivity probably has to do with how long your cable is, but it's more than adequate for sort of casual local listening.
So I know this goes a little bit beyond what you actually did, but how does it determine when the signal is strong enough that it's...
That's part of the programming in the chip.
Okay, so there's more to that chip than just there's programming in there.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. But that documentation for some of these little kits isn't as good as it ought to be. Now I would say this is, right now is probably the best time for kit building since Heathkit went out of business. It's really the array of kits that are available. It's shifted, the kits are smaller. You don't have the full ham station type kits, although there are some like the Elecraft were kits for a while. But it really is. Now, for a little while, the supply chain issues were bothering the kit manufacturers some, but we seem to be coming out the other end of that, although some of the chips that people have used for design for years are not available. So there's some work that needs to be done. Now, what do you need to build kits? Well, next there's basically the fundamental tools you need, right? You need a soldering iron, you need solder, pliers, nippers of some kind, and wire strippers. You probably have screwdrivers and stuff, so I didn't put those in. And looking around the room, most of us need magnifiers of some kind. Begging your pardon, those of you, younger people might not understand the need for these. The other thing you need is to relax your hands so that I have a little bit, just a natural aging tremor, and it makes soldering little tiny things sometimes a little more exciting than you think. And those little surface mount parts, if you make a mistake, they go into the ozone and are never seen again. I can't tell you how many times, even for normal sized components, I've been sweeping under my work desk to find the part that I really dropped. Now, you really can build almost anything with these, but there are some other tools that are nice to have. Lots of things are nice to have. You can see there's that yellow thing is it holds PC boards so you can work on them a little bit easier. Flip them over. You put the. Most of my building is still through parts. So you put the part in, then flip it over to solder it. One advantage to the surface mount is that you don't have to do that. You just put it down and solder it. The disadvantage is they're really, really tiny. That middle thing, actually I was just using it today, that middle thing is a desoldering tool. It's got a hollow tip. You put it on the thing, and then the little pump kicks back and sucks the solder out so you can remove that part that you put in the wrong place. Or actually, I'm working on one today that I'll talk about a little bit later, that I had to repair something. Now, everything nowadays comes with warning labels. In the old days, the warning label used to be high voltage. Now, the warning is tool and gadget acquisition disorder. This is, actually my workbench is usually more, but you can see I've got a kit of little pliers, I've got a kit of screwdrivers of every type you can imagine, and actually, that saved the day a couple times when I had to fix somebody's Game Boy, or not Game Boy, whatever the new ones are. I've got an oscilloscope. This is the power supply you're seeing there, and there's actually some other power supplies. The one thing that I find really, do you see that little thing in the center, that little TV screen? That's actually a magnifier that, and boy, is that helpful for me. And I think even those of you with good eyesight, the magnifying is an important part of the game to see what's going on. But it is a bit of a problem. You do get carried away, and it gets worse.
Where did you get that TV screen thing? I need one of those for reading.
Yeah, there are better versions for reading that maybe come down like that, but that's got a pretty good focus. It's just Amazon. I just looked on Amazon. There's different versions of it. Mine has the screen attached to the camera, but there are others that have the camera, it goes to your computer screen, and then there of course are the physical magnifiers. That my dad used a physical magnifier for a long time. With a lot of light was probably as much of an issue as magnification. And I remember he's been dead for a while, and I really want to send him an apology, because when we were driving, he would always say, "Why don't you put on your brights?" I said, "I don't need brights. I can see there." Guess what? I put on my brights all the time now. I see some nodding going on. So on the left is various parts bins. There's all sorts of capacitors, transistors. I do stupid things like buy jumble kits, and you find out why they've jumbled all those resistors. They're like 137 ohm resistors and 15 ohm, no resistor you'll ever use, but you get a nice big bag full of them. Connectors, and then on the right, well, that's just my junk pile. There's all sorts of stuff in there. TV antennas, there's a little antenna tuner that slowly take right, and you can just barely see at the bottom an old military radio. That actually belongs to a Cayenne, and I've had it for 30 years almost, and nobody's ever going to use it. I don't know if it works anymore. All sorts of crazy stuff. Speakers, well, it gets ugly. Now, what kind of things, let's go on a little more and enjoy. We'll go to the next one. This is a set of kits, and they're actually up here if you want to come up and look at them in a bit. These are by a group called Pacific Antenna, and I'll talk about that later because I'll show you some of their stuff. They make a whole range of kits. Now, because I mostly like low power CW, I'm sort of in hog heaven because that's really much of the building stuff is for low powered and at least the inexpensive building stuff. But there are plenty of homebrew 100-watt amplifiers and other things like that. So you can build your way up, and there are some sideband rigs, in particularly a beautiful one that we're going to hear about next month. So I won't steal the thunder there. But here we're probably not going to be able to hear anything. This is a 40 meter. Where's my power? This is a 40 meter direct conversion receiver, and if you've never heard a direct, no, don't connect the red to the black. This is a base. I'll get to Ed. Ed already knows the story about this one, but I did. Okay. So let's see if I can get. Yeah, we're not getting any signals in here. So what did I do? I brought my transmitter. I'm sending obscenities. No.
It's your call sign.
It's my call sign, yeah. So,
You can't fool me.
wait a minute, maybe. No, I think it's we're so much inside the building, and my antenna is just a piece of coax that we're not hearing anything. It's a shame because the direct, and I was gonna, here. We've got to have at least some technical talk here. So I've got the little oscilloscope set up, and I don't know if you can see. Can you see that it's a sine wave?
Sine wave, yeah.
It's a lovely sine wave. This is at the output of the transmitter. Pretty clean transmitter. But if I go to the other end,
I was gonna say, hold it back up. He's got the.
Yeah, if you hold it up, I'll zoom in on it.
oh, hang on a second. Okay. Well, it might. Uh-oh. What did I do wrong here?
Well, it's a very small sine wave.
No,
Very,
it's
very low amplitude. Approximately 0.
oh. Something's gone a little haywire because it's jiggling. Which way do I go?
There it is.
Yeah, so it's a little bit I've got something hooked up wrong. But you can see that it's a sine wave, and originally it was a real clean sine wave. If you go farther back in the transmitter, and I better not try it now, you'll see that at the other end, whoa, that's not what. Okay, Chessie, could you hold that for me? At the other end, and there's some pulsing going on here. Yeah, is it showing? At the other end of the low pass filter, you can see that it's not a beautiful sine wave, it's a jaggy wave. That means there's some harmonic components. So one of the things that I have to have something technical to talk. One of the things that a low pass filter does at the output of a transmitter is eliminates the high frequencies that you don't want. It also does some impedance matching too, so there's good things too. So, but something's messed up with my connection at the moment. This has pretty pure output, which pleased me when I built it. What I've got here is crystal controlled, and so I've got a few crystals for that. Okay, why don't we go back to...
There's a guy on YouTube that makes all these tiny little gadgets that he puts in, Altoids tins and stuff.
Yeah.
And he put up a post recently where he did a summits thing with a little gadget like this that was CW, but it was taps. It was just tapping sounds.
Oh, interesting.
And he was getting contacts from all over.
Yeah. YouTube's got a lot of great stuff, and some pretty loony stuff too, but especially for electronics. If nothing else, it's got Mr. Carlson's Lab, which is one of the most entertaining shows that you can. He always talks about, he's Canadian, he's Western Canadian, he always talks about soldering. And the capacitors are measured in microfarads. And I don't think that's really what the Canadians say. I think he's just a lunatic. But he does tear down of classic equipment. It's really, which I kind of love because that was from my day. I don't want to take up too much. So next, actually up here, not only, you don't have to solder. A lot of really good work, probably not much RF work, can be done on these plug-in breadboards. So what you're seeing here is, it's actually a VFO. I'm going to point to a couple of things. I know it's going to throw people online, but maybe you can see what it is. This right here is the little Arduino Uno. That's the microcontroller. This guy right here is an SI5351. It's a clock circuit, but I think of it as a frequency determining circuit, which is what a clock does for computer clocks. And then this is a push button. Oops.
Sorry.
There we go.
You're there.
Back.
And this is just a push button. And so what this is set up to do, this one happens to, I actually wrote the software for this, which is really silly because there's all sorts of great software for this set up on GitHub that do much more than my program does, but it's mine. And the push button there is to jump the frequency when you go from transmit to receive, so you don't interfere with yourself. Or ideally, switch the frequency a little bit if it's really a transceiver. So this is the breadboard, and it's actually up here if you want to come see it later. By doing a push button, I can change which digit of the frequency I'm going to change, and then I use a rotator to do it. So afterwards, if you're interested, you come up and actually see how this little guy works. But once you've got something working on breadboard, then you usually do want to solder it up for regular use. And that's the next one. This is the same circuit but soldered, although you notice I didn't design a PC board or anything like that. I just got a solder breadboard. It's the same layout. I should have mentioned these breadboards are set up in a very clever way. The columns are all connected together. And then those long lines, if you go back, well, you can sort of see it here. If you go back one, the top 2 rows and the bottom 2 rows, they're connected horizontally. They're connected across. Those are power buses. That's where you typically put your DC. Then down below those vertical lines, each vertical line is connected to each other. So when you plug, it's a little hard to see, I know, but if you see something like this guy, those two are in separate columns, so they're not connected. But they are connected to a pin here directly. So you plug everything in, you get it wrong a lot because you're off by one or something. But it's a lot of fun. And so I had a lot of fun doing Arduino programming, including a year or so ago, on the 4th of July, I programmed it to actually play the Star Spangled Banner, and then I had a bunch of LEDs, and at the end of the Star Spangled Banner, they went with all different colors and stuff. I took it apart, and it's just been too much trouble to try to put it back together. I've got the notes for it. Actually, while I'm there, let me make one little bit of advice. If you start tinkering and building things, it's really a good idea to do something about documenting that. This originally is my start for documenting for this VFO thing, but now it's got lots of other stuff. I have a drawer in my shack that's full of designs of things I've built. I had one little thing, I couldn't figure out what it was. And I looked and looked and looked, and I finally, way at the bottom, I built it years ago, I found it was a multi-vibrator. It was a code practice oscillator. And so I powered it up, and sure enough, it worked. That was the one I was going to give to David, but it wasn't loud enough, so we got a louder one for him. Oh, let's go back to this next one. Now, that's the same circuit soldered up, and you might wonder, why on earth would I bring the breadboard to the meeting? Because I don't know how I got it here without any of the wires pulling out, because I'd never get them back in the right place. I mean, I'd have to use this to get them back in the right place. Well, I was showing some of these things to the class, the general class yesterday, and I set up this little guy here and ran it and stuff. Everything worked fine. And then later I was showing them how to use a voltage tester. That you touch the outlet and it tells you whether it's live or not. And so I decided to show them that it works for DC too, only I forgot that I still had it connected. So I think I blew out the Uno. Luckily, they're pretty cheap.
So you throw 120 volts?
No, 32 volts. 32, but it's still.
Still.
Yeah, 32 volts onto the voltage
Six,
regulator.
5 and 3 or the 5 and 3 1/3. Or
Yeah, although actually this goes into it. Oh, here. I was running it from a Arduino, so this can actually take 12 or 15 and drop down, but it can't take 32, I find.
Right.
Actually, interesting enough, what it did is it blew out the 5 volt. Okay,
Hold on,
well,
let's
enough of
let's
that.
show it.
So,
I'm just trying to get there. That,
Oh.
right?
so the rest of this, we won't have to swap back and forth. I'll just play it. There are a lot of good kit suppliers. These two little radios I was just showing you come from Pacific Antennas, and they actually have, you can see some antenna kits there. If you go to the next page, you can see they have quite a range of, I'm sorry, it's a little blurry, quite a range of kits involving radios, those are transmitters up top, and receivers, all sorts of accessories like dummy loads and other things that are very useful, test equipment of all different kinds, mostly low power. One thing I didn't mention about things that are useful to have are component testers. There are capacitor testers and inductor testers. There are some little ones that come from China that are surprisingly good for about 20 bucks that can measure capacitors, resistors, transistors with a reasonable degree of accuracy. It's really kind of amazing. I have some reservations about a lot of stuff that comes from China, but when they do a good job, they do a good job. Okay, so there's one of the best, and next one I'll just mention is QRP Labs. This is a fellow he's English, but he lives in Turkey, of all places. And he's come up with some really, really wonderful kits. Again, I'm mostly interested in the CW ones, but he's got a little digital radio that basically just has a power input, antenna input, and a USB port, and a light to tell you that it's on. It's called the QDX, and it's really wonderful. And he's been working for some years on a sideband QRP radio, which we hope will come out eventually. Now, go to the, we're almost done here. Here are two of his transceivers. The very first one, the QCX transceiver, is over there on the left. It's about a 5 watt, mine's 40 meters. That was first designed for one of the Youth on the Air things years and years ago. So it's got some odd features to it, but it's a wonderful little radio, really good. And some of you were at my talk about IQ modulation last year. This is where I first heard about that because he uses that in the receiver for this system. So if you remember that, I talked about that, or if you look it up. To the right is a slightly newer version. It's actually the same circuit essentially, spread out a little bit, by the way, if you're a builder. He did two things. He made the QCX Plus, I'm sorry, which I built there for 20 meters. He also did the QCX Mini, where he took it and it actually made it smaller. And that's really tough to build. So I don't need, but if you're a mountain topper or something, it fits in your shirt pocket. It's a pretty amazing little radio.
Is that CW only?
It's CW only, yeah. And I mean, they cost about 50 bucks plus the case. So, you know, it's really a good deal, and they're wonderful performers. The receivers are they got built-in keyers, all sorts of memory keyers, so you can send things. So it's really kind of cool. Now, here's my shack is the next one. Other kits. Yeah, here, if you look at this guy, in the back, the only SSB radio I have is that white one down there, the Microbit X. And I've not used it much for CW. I just use it for SSB. I just use it. Those are made in India. And the guy did something really cool. Winding toroids is one of the least fun things you can do when you're building, or winding coils in general. He actually has a group of Indian women in the town that he lives in who wind the toroids for you, and they come all pre-wound and adjusted and everything. And it actually, it helps pay their bills and stuff. So it's really kind of a cool thing. He's got a more fancy radio that hasn't quite been perfected yet, the S-Bit X, and I would recommend that in a few, that won't be a kit, I don't think though, but in a year or so, that might be a nice go-to little radio.
Those were hot about 2 or 3 years ago.
The microbit
Those
X
were
ones.
really big. 'Cause,
Yeah.
I mean,
These are still available.
yeah, and I think a couple members of the club had them. They're modifiable.
Yeah, they're really easy to work on, they're open, they're pretty nice. On top of it is a radio for 30, 12, and 15 meters. Again, it puts out around 3 to 4 watts, which that's, you really, I entered that radio and was one of the top scorers in the country on 15 meters in the QRP section, even though I was running 4 watts instead of 5. So it gets out very well. The receiver on that one is not quite as good as the QCXs, but it's more than adequate for what you're, if I have trouble hearing somebody, I'm not gonna work them on CW, on QRP, so. I can't resist mentioning, if you look, you see my little key, that's the one that's up here. Well, it's a different version. Up on the left, you can just barely see a little super scaff audio filter that I built, and above it is my homebrew in a mince tin switcher so I can listen to 2 radios at once. So I can listen on 2 different frequencies at once. And in the front is a kit, and you can't really see it, but that keyer, it's a memory keyer that I built it's in QST 1990. And I built it then, and I'm still using it every day. It's a iambic keyer, but it also has memories. So the first red button there almost always says KF4AV. And the next one says RTU599. So in contest, this is really quite useful. I haven't gone the win key. Next, we're almost home. So here's my shack. And as you can see, it is a model of disorder, I suppose. But I've got a little a MacBook and other things I found very useful to have computer connections. Automatic logging from FT8 and stuff is all very, very nice. I was very proud of it. I got through to there's a de-expedition in St. Brandon's Island off the coast of Mauritius, and thousands of people were calling him. But then I got him on CW when thousands of people called. It was just amazing. The waterfall on my radio would just light up. So I was very proud of that. That was very nice. But it needs work. Okay, and as God said to Noah, go forth and build. Noah was one of the first documented homebrewer. And later he made some homebrew whiskey and not whiskey, I think it was beer of some kind, and got drunk, and that we don't go any further in that story. But anyways, thank you for listening. If you want to look at some of this stuff, I'll be here. If you have any questions about the sites I talked about, the companies that I talked about, I've got my call sign there. My KF4AV at ARRL.net actually forwards to the next one down, which is, and that's in the membership list if you want to. So if you have questions or if you want to get any of those addresses, there I am. And I'm also available for CW scads and probably phone if you really insist. I think I remember where my microphone is. So, thank you very much. If you have any questions,
Any questions for Dan?
or they could bring them up and just take a look at things if they want to. I'll leave.
So is the 42 a nod to Douglas Adams?
Yes. And as I said, this is the amateur hour. Next week, you're going to see the real professionals, Curtin and Peters.
Yeah,
good speakers, by
Al
the way.
Peters and Jack Purdom are going to come in and talk about the T41 SDR,
Yeah.
the SDR transceiver that you can build. We
That's
have a copy of the book in the library.
Which I donated.
Well, I didn't want to buy a copy because it looks awesome.
It is awesome, but it's a lot of information. So and there's going to be a new version of it. So if you do want to buy it.
Right, yeah, and I think we're going to get a presentation on the new version.
Yes, yeah. So that presentation next month should be very, very interesting. It's a very sophisticated radio, and there's going to be some kits available from 4 States QRP Club. I think they're planning on it anyways.
Well, talking about
That's
kits, Hamvention, a lot of, I know
Yes.
QRP Labs is there. I think I've seen Pacific
I think,
Antenna in the past.
and a lot of other companies are there that
Yeah, so if you want to get kits, that's the place to go. AmVeg in a couple of months.
yeah, it's not far from here.
All right. All right, well, thanks again, Dan.
Oh, thank you. I love to talk about this stuff, so.